There are emotional gatherings as different parts of the world mark the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine with vigils. The United Nations voted overwhelmingly to demand Russia immediately and unconditionally withdraw its troops from Ukraine.
The partner of jailed Ava Kiley, the former Vice President of the European Parliament, has been released but must wear an electronic tag.
Different parts of the world are marking the first anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine with vigils. People gathered at this one in London's Trafalgar Square to show their support for those still living in the war-torn country.
We speak to them, we ask about the situation in Ukraine, we support them, so they need emotional, psychological support, but also we learn from them how to be strong. They tell us, guys, we will win. So they tell us, don't worry, just help, give us help as much as we can, as you can, and we will stay strong, we will win.
In Brussels, the Ukrainian flag colours lit up the buildings of the European institutions. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower also lit up in yellow and blue, as well as the Parliament building in Portugal. The support and solidarity on the first-year anniversary of the invasion also came from the other side of the Atlantic. In New York, dozens of people gathered in front of the Russian consulate to protest against the war.
A year ago, Putin started the war against Ukraine. I have family in Ukraine, I have family in Russia, and I'm against Putin. I'm against what he's doing. I'm against him taking the territories that do not belong to him.
Most of the world seems to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. There's no end in sight yet. However, according to recent polls, Europeans and Americans share the goal of Ukraine victory, even if this means prolonging the war.
In favor,
the United Nations voted overwhelmingly to demand Russia immediately and unconditionally withdraw its troops from Ukraine. At the General Assembly, 141 members voted in favor of the resolution, reaffirming support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, 7 opposed it and 32 abstained, including China and India.
We are satisfied with the outcome, and the message is clear. It doesn't matter what Russia tries and how it attempts to undermine international order, and the coalition in support of Ukraine's territorial integrity, it fails one time after another.
The EU's Foreign Affairs Chief says most of the world has the same message.
On the Russian side, there is a small handful of votes confirming that in the eyes of the world, the aggression against Ukraine needs to stop. And it needs to stop now and open the door to a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace.
However, Hungary has prevented the 27 member states from agreeing on a new round of sanctions against Russia. But ministers will meet again to try to reach an agreement in the coming days. Meanwhile, the US has announced a new package of sanctions, which it says will be sweeping. In addition, the White House has announced that it'll approve a new aid package for Kyiv. Before the war, the city of Marinka, located near Donetsk, had more than 9,000 inhabitants. A year after the Russian invasion, devastation is everywhere, and there is no one left in this ghost town nestled in the middle of the battlefront.
Місто повністю зруйноване, повністю. Немає ні одної будівлі, яка би не зазнала ушкоджень. Наразі цивільного населення в Мар'їнці нема, тому що силами військової адміністрації та поліції ми евакуювали все населення, всіх дітей із Мар'їнки, тому що немає там можливості для життя цивільного населення.
Bells rang out in Kyiv at midnight to mark the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. The capital is far away from the worst days of the invasion, but the conflict is still very much alive in the east and in the south.
Ну, насправді, рік тому було набагато мені страшніше. Я не знала ще тоді, що нас чекає насправді. Було, ну, не по собі. Зараз ми настільки впевнені в нашій армії, що насправді, ну, дуже спокійно. Ми гуляємо. Я не знаю, що буде завтра, ми не знаємо. Але на даний момент ми дуже натхнені.
In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's continuing with positive diplomatic talks and discussions on gathering more weapons. However, tens of thousands of Ukrainians have died so far. They'll be remembered on Friday. As the war rages on, the Ukrainians continue with their determination and hope in their hearts for victory.
Ukraine boycotted the latest meeting of the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe over the presence of Russian lawmakers that they described as an affront. The event was held in Vienna. Austria granted them visas, even though they're under European Union sanctions, and despite protests from 20 countries, including Britain, France and Canada. Some delegates left the room when the floor was given to a Russian parliamentarian. Others voiced their anger.
It's a disgrace that this delegation is here, particularly the delegation that consists of members who are sanctioned individuals who voted to annex independent countries' territories, Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia Oblast, Lugansk. Those are the principles this institution was vouched to protect and guard.
Russian MPs were not invited to previous OSCE meetings in the United Kingdom and Poland, but Austria, as the host country of the organisation, claims to be bound by an international agreement.
It is of course difficult to sit with Russian parliamentarians who have blindly supported the Kremlin's war, but it is important that the Russian MPs hear our message. I will be sure to let them know that we reject the war and that OSCE Parliamentary Assembly supports Ukraine.
Demonstrators also gathered in front of the venue to denounce the presence of Russian deputies and the war crimes of Vladimir Putin. When Ukrainians woke up to the sound of Russian missiles exploding in their towns and cities, millions of them fled to train stations. There were no tickets to take them to safety as such, but there were trains to take them further west, away from the fighting. Since the start of the Russian invasion, Ukraine railways have transported 4 million people to western Ukraine and over 500,000 to destinations outside the country. The company had to change timetables daily, depending on where civilians needed to be evacuated from most urgently. Getting on the train, people often didn't know where they were going to, but they knew where they were escaping from.
Those days were a nightmare, but we gave our citizens, our people, the feeling that they should get to the station and that would be enough. They're safe, they can get first aid, medical aid, psychological aid, some food, hot tea, and get evacuated until the end of the day. Slow, uncomfortable, but get evacuated to safer place. Like many people, like many companies, like many institutions in Ukraine, we were preparing for the war. But we were not ready for such kind of the war. Full-scale invasion with shellings, with air bombing and so on. So finally, I don't want to be in a case anymore where I would be not ready for something. That's why since summer we are ready for everything. We are in different environment. We are preparing for any scenario that could happen.
Ukrainian resilience in the face of the Russian onslaught extends to its railways.
Ukraine Railways, the company, starts operating in the deoccupied territories of Ukraine. In what delay?
Kherson, it took us a week. Me and my team was there on the second day after the occupation, then on the fourth day, then in a week. In a week we brought the first train. It was complicated because we had to repair the infra, the mine, tracks, station and all the area.
Simferopol, Kherson, Luhansk, Sevastopol, Kerch, Berdyansk. Where will you go after the victory?
If you remember, the president said to Letterman that one day he will go to seashore and have some beer. And on the president's birthday, I promised him a train to Crimea, to seashore in Crimea. So probably I will take the same train.
Disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced by a Los Angeles court to an additional 16 years in prison for rape and sexual assault. The 70-year-old was found guilty of attacking an actress during a film festival in the city in 2013. He denies the charges. The jury acquitted him of sexual battery of a massage therapist and failed to reach verdicts on counts involving 2 other women. Weinstein, who's already serving 23 years for an earlier conviction in New York, begged the judge not to give him a life term. Francesca Giorgi, the partner of former European Parliament Vice President Ava Kiley, has been freed from jail but will wear an electronic bracelet. The announcement was made on Thursday by the Belgian Federal Prosecutor's Office. Ava Kiley remains behind bars. Both are implicated in a corruption scandal in the European Parliament involving Qatar and Morocco. Investigators found €150,000 in cash at Kiley's Brussels home. MEPs Mark Tarabella and Pier Antonio Panzeri are also in custody.